focus. I love it when we're fellowshipping and talking, but there's so much to cover this morning. I'm not even certain if I'm going to be able to get through all of it. Can we turn the lights on in the back? Can we just give us, make us look completely occupied? This is something that I am really excited to share with you. I know we've talked about our mission statement for a while. I've been asked about theology of mission. And so we're going to take this moment while we can and dive into this. But first, I would like to pray. So the Lord be with you. Let us pray. Father, thank you so much for being present in this room. Thank you for the promises that you've given throughout history. Thank you for, at the very beginning, when Adam and Eve fell, you made a promise that you would undo that fall, that you would fix it, that you would restore humanity to yourself. And for the rest of time, you have been unfolding your plan. And on that timeline, here we are. Here we are, Lord. You have made us part of your story. You made St. Gabriel's part of that story. And as you have acted throughout the ages, you continue to act even today. And in that action, you have called us to be alive and hopeful and faithfully following you. And you made a plan for St. Gabriel's Episcopal Church, and that you are working out that plan in us. And we're excited about all the things that you have been doing, that you are promised to do in our future. And so I pray that you would help us open up our minds and our hearts today. Help us to grasp quickly these points of Scripture, only because we just have a short time really to be together this morning. Help us to see and comprehend. Give us the power to follow you and the faith to walk in your steps. Would you bless this morning in Jesus' name? Amen. We've come this morning to talk about the mission of the church, and specifically our mission to bear the redemptive image of Christ to a broken world. That's a big mouthful. And as I said a few weeks ago in here, as we kind of chewed through some of that, it's not something that I fully expect us to grasp and understand the complexities of it right at first. But it's something that if this becomes, if we remember this phrase and it becomes part of how we do ministry, if it guides, if we ask the question, how are we bearing the redemptive image to a broken world? I think over time, beginning hopefully with today, there are going to be aha moments. There's going to be moments where it's like, oh, now I get it. That's what Father Rob is talking about when he's talking about the broken world. Well, that's the easy one. But the redemptive image, like, what does it mean to be an image? And all these things, as they come together and as we are called as a church, as individuals, but as a church, as we're called to follow Christ, it's going to involve this active bearing the redemptive image of Christ to a broken world. And so you have an outline, or you have a handout. It's much less detailed than my notes. And hopefully you have a pen or pencil to either write notes or write questions as we move through this. Because I know we're going to have to clarify a few things right off the bat. The first thing is we need to talk about what a mission really is. Like, what do we mean by mission? It's a mission is a core purpose. A mission is like the direction that we're going to go. This could be for an individual. It could be for an organization. It could be for a small group of people. And it could be various. Kiwanis has a mission. And, the Elks Lodge has a mission. And churches have various missions. And it's a central focus. And a mission becomes a litmus test. That's the thing. When you have a stated mission, you're like, this is where we're going to go. This is what we want to accomplish. And that becomes a litmus test for decision making. That's huge. Because as leaders, especially at St. Gabriel's, we're making decisions every week, every day. And we have some strategic decisions to make, and we need a litmus test to determine, okay, is this really where God wants us to go? The mission statement is part of that test. It's not the only test, but it's part of that test. And the other thing about mission is that it implies action. So mission is a core purpose. It's a direction, it's a focus, it's a litmus test, and it implies action. Meaning, if you have a mission, but you spend the rest of your life sitting on your backside, is your mission being accomplished? No. Not at all. You have a vision of what you would like to see it be, but you don't have a mission. You're not acting on the mission. And the thing about the mission of the church, and what I want to cover today, is the mission of the church begins with creation. A lot of people think it's the Great Commission, go into all the world, preach the gospel, make disciples, that sort of thing, which is true, but that verse, that statement, that command, actually is a reiteration of a moment that takes place in creation. And so the first thing is, the mission of the church actually begins with the mission of creation. For those of you who were in my BYOB class, when we started talking about the overview of the Bible, we spent a lot of time. In fact, I don't even think we've gotten out of Genesis, but we spent a lot of time around the creation story. Because it's important. It's the foundation of everything. So some of this will sound familiar. God created humanity in a very specific and purposeful way. And that's what we're going to look at. And this plan that's inherent in our createdness, our created being, how God created us, this plan has not been thwarted because of sin. A lot of things have been messed up because of sin. But when Adam and Eve sinned, got kicked out of the garden, it doesn't change God's created purpose for humanity. That is really important. That is really important. And then, as we go through time and we get to this moment in time, thousands of years after creation, thousands of years, millennia, we are now still in the same stream. Our mission as a church is born out of the mission of creation. We fulfill the mission of creation through this statement, bearing the redemptive image of Christ to a broken world. And that's what I want to focus on today, and hopefully in the time we have, get through this. So the creation-oriented mission is based upon two truths. There are two truths that come from the creation story that direct the mission of humanity. The first one is that we are created in the image of God. Now, right off the bat, that should ding, 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 ding. What's one of the words in our statement? Image. Image. Where did that come from? Image of God, image of Christ. Is Christ God? Absolutely. The image of Christ. We are made in the image of God. I just want to preach a whole sermon on that because it is incredible. I'll rein myself in. We are created in the image of God, and in the creation story, we're given a purpose. We are given a purpose or a mandate. This mandate still defines why we're here on earth. It's the answer to the question, what is the meaning of life? How many times have people joked about that question, what is the meaning of life? Well, I've got an answer for you, in a sense, and it's through this story. And so the first thing I want to talk about is creation and the image of God. And so now we're going to draw ourselves back. We're going to go back to Genesis 1. And we are going to remember how God created in 6 days. The first day, he said, let there be light. He set up, for those of you who were in my Bible study class, he set up domains, and then he set up dominions, right? The domains, the earths and the skies and the waters. And he set up places, and then he filled those places, and he put people over those places. He created dominions over them. But we get to the final moment of creation. Then God said, let us make humankind, or mankind, or this is the NRSV, so we have to say humankind now. Let us make humankind in our image, after our likeness. And other translations, I think the King James actually use image. But image after our likeness, so they may rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, over the cattle, over the earth, over the creatures that move on the earth. God created humankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them. First of all, we need to see that humanity is the pinnacle of God's creation. It's not, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's look at how all of the animals were created according to their kinds. Let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds. Animals each according to their kind. But when we get to the moment of creation of Adam and Eve, he uses very specific and different language. Let us make humankind in our image, in our likeness. This is very important. I just realized I didn't put that section in my notes. We are not a higher form of the animal kingdom. We are not. No matter what the world wants to tell you, no matter how we want to dumb down who humanity is, if you dumb down who humanity is, then you dumb down our responsibility on this earth. You dumb down the value of humanity. We are not a super animal. We have many things in common with how the skeletal structure and the heart and the lungs and all that stuff, we have biological similarities with the animal kingdom. But the reality is we are not super animals. We are made in God's image. That's what sets us apart. And we're also given a responsibility. We see it here. So they may rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air and over the cattle on the earth. We are given a prominence over all of that. And the whole story about Adam naming all the animals, that told the Israelite ear that humanity is higher than the animals. Because if a person can name another, that means this person has control, has preeminence, has dominance over the other person, that is the other thing that is named. That's an ancient Near Eastern mindset. And so, humanity is not a super animal. We are made in God's image. We have a special place and a special purpose in God's creation, and we must live up to that purpose. Okay, now we need to get into a little bit of nitty-gritty, because we need to understand something. We need to understand what Moses is saying as he's writing and using these words. First of all, there are two different words for image and likeness. Now, what we're doing is we're going to flesh out a little bit what it means to be created in the image of God. This is really important. This is really important. Please don't try that, scribble down the Hebrew. I used to be really good at Hebrew. Now I can't even remember the alphabet. There are two different words, and this is an important understanding. Tselem and demut, image and likeness. And they define who we are as made in the image of Christ. One of them is like a noun, it's declarative. Tselem is used frequently for images like statues, like models, like paintings, like replicas. If you create something that looks like something else, that is a tselem. And demut is likeness. This is a verbal form. So this is to be like, to reflect, to actively be like something else. We're called to reflect the God that we worship, in who we are and how we act. So our image, the image of God is, I reflect him in one sense like a mirror. In a sense, I have qualities. We're created with qualities and characters and different things that reflect, that say to the world, this is an image of God. That's not... How many have heard the phrase image of God before? Please. We have all heard the phrase image of God. Has it just gone, wow? Or have you stopped to think what it means to be an image of God? That's really important. We reflect who God is, but we also actively live in ways that reflect his characteristics, his love, his justice, his kindness, and sometimes wrath. Like we actively also reflect the character of God. And then this idea of statue is going to become really important a little bit later. So we're going to have to hold on to that, because this part I think is really easy. We know God is loving and kind and just, and we are supposed to walk in ways that reflect his loving kindness and justice. And we do this among each other, right? I approach you in ways that are just and loving and kind. We interact with each other in ways that that's easier. This might be a little bit harder in the ways that we reflect, but I'm going to point one out in a moment. We're going to get there. What is important? This is the fun part. What is important about this is how the Israelite mind would have heard it. Now remember, we're talking Moses. He's given us the story of creation. But this is Moses. Who's his audience? Who are the first people that have heard this story? Anyway.
Slaves.
They were slaves, right? Give me the big word. Israel. Israel's listening to this for the first time. They had been slaves, but what happened? The Exodus happened. Help me out here. The Exodus happened. They went out, they crossed the Red Sea. In just a couple days, they stood at Mount Sinai. What happened at Mount Sinai? Huh? The law came down. They met God. God showed up. Oh! All right? So, probably, Moses did not write this before Mount Sinai. We know that after Mount Sinai, they went off through the desert. How long of a trek is it to get to the Jordan River? 2 weeks. It's not that long to get to the Jordan River. 2 weeks. Walking. And yet, it took them 40 years, right? Went around the desert. We know why. They're wandering around the desert. They disobeyed, yada, yada, yada. But as Moses writes these words, he takes those 40 years to create the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, and he starts, we're assuming, with Genesis to give them a basis of who they are, who their God is, who God is, who humankind is, and why everything is so messed up. Because in chapter 3, we find out about the fall, right? So Moses writes them a story telling them a whole lot of other things. I mean, all the gods that Egypt worshipped are gods, are things, or not gods, or things that God created in the first chapter. So right off the bat, it's a polemic against the Egyptian form of worship. And then we get to the creation of humanity. And this is great because he said, you are made in the image of light and likeness of God. And Israel has just spent 400 years in captivity in Egypt. They've been influenced by Egyptian politics. They've been influenced by Egyptian religion. They've been enslaved. All they know of the cultic life, of the religious life, all they really know is what they've been surrounded with the Egyptian pantheon, and what few truths have been left with them in their hearts by God. That's all they know. And they get out on the road, the desert road. They get out on the road, and Moses writes, you were made in the image of God. And any good Israelite would have stopped and said, hold up. I know this phrase. They would have known the phrase image of God because in the ancient Near East, what they've been surrounded with this whole time, there was a term that was image of God. That was something they knew. The term image of God was equated with being the royal Son of God. The purpose of the royal Son of God was to be an intermediary between God and earth, to take the will of God and reflect it on earth. Remember, they are importing all these definitions into Moses' writing. To the Israelite ear, having just left captivity, they already know Son of God. To the Israelite ear, having just left captivity, they already had an image of God. The image of God was the Pharaoh. There was only one image of God in all creation to the Israelite mind, because that term was already applied to the Pharaoh. And so Moses declares that not Pharaoh, but all of humanity. All of humanity was created to be the image of God. All of humanity had this task of taking God's will in earth and reflecting it down, or God's will in heaven and reflecting it to those around them in earth. And he is saying, not just the Pharaoh, but all of humanity, especially you, Israel, this is your calling. This is your task. There's one more, let's see, we're going to cover that. And then there's one more really important, there's several things that would have set off alarm bells to the Israelite ear. But the first one is this image of God. The second thing is these two words, tselem and likeness. Because there was another way to understand image of God that, quite frankly, it would have gone straight through the head. Well, you're either talking about the Pharaoh, or you're talking about the extension of the Pharaoh, and those are statues. One of the definitions, one of the images that would have been launched in the Israelite brain when they heard these two words, one of them would have been this idea of the image of the Pharaoh or the statue. In Egypt, the Israelites had been surrounded by images of the image of God. They were surrounded by images of statues. There were statues of the Pharaoh, and they were placed all over his kingdom. The thing is, well, two things. First of all, he's not only declaring that you are the image of God, not just Pharaoh, but by how you were created, you have the role of the image of God, but you are also little statues that reflect not the Pharaoh, but God himself. And how these statues were used, make sure I'm not getting ahead of myself. Every time Pharaoh and his armies would go out and he would conquer a territory, that territory would come into submission under the Pharaoh and all of his armies. What do you think they did next to determine, to declare? What? Put up a statue. We have these all throughout antiquity, where a pharaoh would go out and conquer a territory, a group of people, a village, or whatever. The next thing they would do would be put up a statue of the pharaoh because it declared this space belongs to this image of God. This space belongs to the reflection of God, who happens to be our pharaoh. So as Moses writes Genesis, as he discusses creation, as he's blowing their minds with the Egyptian worship order, the Egyptians' pantheon. The Egyptians worshipped the gnats, the frogs, the bugs, the sun, the moon, the stars, the rivers. They worshipped all of that, and Moses comes along and says, nope, God created all of those, and he is the one whom you worship. Totally wrecking their paradigm. And then he calls them the image of God. We are God's little statues. We are God's statues. Not only do we reflect him in our actions, in the way we show love, kindness, and justice with each other, and many other of God's traits and characteristics. That's why it's so dang important to the writers in the New Testament. When they tell you to put off the old man and take on the new, and what does that new man look like? These are all the characteristics of God. It's because we're created in the image of God. When we are redeemed, we need to reflect the one whom we worship. In fact, by the created order, we are designed to reflect the thing that we worship. How many people do you know worship money? How many people do you know worship sex? How many people do you know worship power? How many do you know who worship all of these other things? Or maybe they're kids, or maybe their parents, or maybe, I don't know, they're golf clubs. I mean, in a funny way, we become like we worship. We reflect the thing that we worship. Somebody who worships their golf clubs, what does their life look like? A set of golf clubs. Now, here's the thing. That's a whole nother discussion. That's a whole nother teaching. And I can show you in Scripture that is by design. And throughout Scripture, you see God declaring when people do not follow him. You see God using language describing his people in terms of the things that they worship. It's fascinating. But I digress. This image of God principle, actively reflecting his characteristics, that's one thing. But the idea of being God's statues, does that make a little bit more sense when we think about it in the context of what Israel would have heard?
Yes.
Now, how that plays out, we're going to talk about in a minute. But they most definitely would have heard it this way. Now, I said there were two creation truths that define a theology of mission. The first one is that we are created in the image of God. The second one is that we have been given a charge. From the very beginning, we've been given a mandate. There's purpose involved in how we are created. There's purpose implied in the fact that we're images of God, but there is purpose in what comes next. So immediately following the first verses that we read, God created humankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. And the very next thing he says is he gives them direction. He gives them a plan. He said, God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air and every creature that moves on the ground. Adam and Eve were given a command upon their creation. God didn't wait. He didn't just say, oh, let me think about this and I'll come back and let you know what I want you to do. No, God had a plan from the very beginning of why he created humanity. And this was it. They were to be fruitful and multiply. Before I go there, just the simple fact that he gives them a mandate to go, to be fruitful and multiply, to fill the earth and subdue it, to rule over the fish of the sea. Right off the Garden of Eden was a beautiful place. I think if you and I started off there, we wouldn't want to leave. I mean, God was there. We were walking with God. Everything's really cool. It was special. But from the very, very beginning, God's plan, the purpose and goal of humanity was not to stay in the garden. Not to stay in this special place. But it was to leave, to go out. But it wasn't that they were supposed to leave the garden and never come back. He says, as we look at these commands, they're called the creation mandate. Adam and Eve and all humanity was to expand the boundaries of Eden. They were supposed to push out the boundaries. They were to make the rest of the earth look like the garden itself. God wanted Adam and Eve and in all of humanity to make all of earth like the garden itself. It's a place where ultimately the glory of God might dwell. And this is really important to understand as we consider our task today. But if we go all the way to eschatology, the study of end times, the book of Revelation, when Jesus comes back, how is that described? Well, if you go to Revelation 20 and 21 and 22, what you see is an entire world recreated, new heaven and a new earth, and you hear the language that says Jesus Christ comes down to live with men and his glory fills all the earth. That's where, there will be no sun to rule the day and no moon for the night. There would be, it's because the glory of Christ fills all of the earth in the description in Revelation. That's where we're going. But here at creation, at the very beginning, God gives Adam and Eve a mandate to go out, to push out, and here's the other thing. And when we look at the second half of that, fill the earth and subdue it, that implies that the earth has not been subdued. That implies that there aren't dominions set up throughout the earth. Eden was a special place. And the rest of the world had not been completed. That doesn't mean it was bad, because all of God's creation was good. You hear it in creation, and this was the day, and it was good. And this is a day, and it was good. And this is a day, it was good. And that is morally good. That is like really good. It is above all good. And then you get to humanity, and it's not good. It's good. It's good. It is superlatively good with humanity. And so, but we get to this point of creation, and God is sending them out, implying that the rest of the world has not been brought into order. It has not been brought underneath his control. It has not been brought under the complete authority of the God of heaven, who now walks in the garden. They're to go out into the chaos that remains. How does creation start? At the very beginning, we know that it's full of chaos. It's formless and void. There are waters, which is an implication of chaos. And the first thing that God does is speaks into the chaos and creates order. And then every step along the way of the creation story, he takes chaos and brings it into order. Chaos brings it into order. Chaos brings it into order. And the next step for humankind was to go out into the rest of creation, and now, not as little gods, but as representatives of God, as ambassadors of God, they would go out into the world, step into the chaos, bring it into order, subdue it, bring it into order, and then establish dominion over that, so that chaos doesn't creep back in. Chaos does not creep back in. How much chaos has creeped into the world? I mean, it's always been there. It feels like it's more chaotic today. That's a sign of how things were created in the beginning, the task that was given to humanity. Sin sidelined that task for many people. We have a job, that we have a mandate that still exists, that we would step into the chaos of the world, subdue it, have dominion over it. Now, don't go wild with those words yet, because we have to talk about that.
You said that there was chaos, and then he straightened it out. Chaos and straightened it out. Did Jesus go to all these places and straighten everything out?
No. No, that's a great question. It's a little bit of a sidetrack, but I want to take that. He asked, did Jesus, everywhere Jesus goes, did he go in and straighten it out? Well, in a sense, yes. In some senses, yes. In a big way, no. Because, and here's your answer, the very first story in Matthew, I think, where Jesus is in Capernaum and he's telling, or he's healing, he's preaching, he's teaching, he's healing, right? And he gets to the end of the first day, he's really tired. He goes up on a mountain. The next day, the disciples show up and say, all right, Jesus, we're ready to go. And he's like, time to go. We got to go to the next village. And they said, but there's a whole bunch of people over here. And he said, no. There are others that need to hear my words. So did he step into, and did he fix all the chaos? No, not all of it. That's not why he came, to fix all the chaos in that moment. He came to fix a greater chaos, which was sin, death, and hell. And that he did succeed at. Okay, let's jump in here. I don't know where I'm at. So let's look at this. There are 4 things that we're commanded to do. There are 4 things that Adam and Eve were commanded to do, and by extension, we are commanded to do. We are commanded to be fruitful and multiply, to fill the earth, to subdue it, and to take dominion over it. This is another one of the topics that we can take 8 weeks. So I'm going to try to cram it in the next 5 minutes. To be fruitful and multiply is to have more children. God wanted Adam and Eve to not be content with just being the 2 of them, but he wants them to procreate. He wants them, he's got a purpose, a mission. The entire mission of God on earth involves more people. As a sideline, people talk about, oh, well, it's not about numbers, our church service isn't about numbers. Well, it's about numbers to God. In one sense, it is about numbers. The more people that are walking with him and following his, it really is about numbers. I know what people are saying. It's not about putting notches in your belt. That's what people are saying. But it is about numbers to God. The second thing is fill the earth. He wanted them to spread beyond the borders of Eden. They were not to stay in the garden. They were not to stay in Eden itself. They were to forever expand upon the limits of their known territory. They were going to go out, and if you go take a basketball, go all the way around, eventually you're going to meet on the other side. That's what God's plan was for humanity. To expand, 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 expand. Third, they were to subdue the earth. They were to subdue the earth. The earth began with chaos. Again, and chaos still existed. But as they go outside of the bounds, and as they take this section outside of the garden, and we begin to subdue it, we plant gardens, and we build societies, and then we take dominion, we put order to the overthing. And basically what you end up with is an image of non-chaos that reflects the garden. Because you're taking chaos and bringing it into order. Adam and Eve were supposed to be gardeners, right? Right? Even the garden had to be tended. That's partly why they were created. Even the garden, this idyllic utopian place, had to be tended. So even without the fall, there was work to do. Work is good. Work is purpose. Humanity must work. It gives us a sense of purpose because now we're lining up with how we were created. And so, as these things come in, you establish a community here, you establish a community here, and now you're expanding the boundaries of Eden. I want to actually tell you all about Eden and the Garden of Eden and how it reflects the temple. Oh, it's amazing. Okay. Third, they were to subdue. So the earth started with chaos. Boundaries were set on chaos. And then, and this is it. This is a description of God's creative order, right? He takes chaos and brings it into order. He sets boundaries on that chaos, and then he pushes those boundaries out. So if Adam and Eve are given a mandate to do these very same actions, do you see how we participate, in a sense, in the creation of earth? Now, be careful. We're not deity. We're not God. We don't speak things into existence. That's not what I'm saying. But we step into the role of God when we are doing these things, when we're multiplying, filling the earth, subduing it, taking dominion over it. We are participating in His creativeness by bringing creative order into the world. Subdue it. The fourth thing is to subdue. Once chaos has been brought into order, humanity is to rule. That's what dominion means. To take dominion over it is to rule. That's not a great word today, but I'm going to be bold here and say the reason why it's not a great word is because the world is rebelling against God's created order. Rule means I get to tell you what to do. Now, that's not how it's displayed. I get to tell Carolyn what to do, but she's an employee, and we get along pretty well, right? There's a good way of doing it, and there's a bad way of doing it. We're not talking about autocratic rule necessarily, but it involves rule, dominating, dominion. We manage our surroundings in such a way that chaos is not allowed to creep in. It's not allowed to creep back in and take foothold. Let's see. And then through order, the world then becomes a place where God's glory can dwell. Humanity is to continue the process of extending into the chaos of the world and bringing it into order, to the end result that it becomes a place where God's glory may dwell. That's why the garden and Eden were so special, because the chaos had been eliminated, it was put into order, you had people that were managing it, and it was in such a perfect shape that God's glory could dwell there. But where there is chaos, where there is sin, now we know that Jesus came into the world, and nothing can stop God's glory from being here. But it's kind of like, the whole matter, antimatter, or oil and water, or whatever, If God's glory came to earth today, it would be cataclysmic. It would be cataclysmic. How many people are shaking their fist in God's face right now? Would they stand in the face of God's glory? God is gracious not to step into the world today. I mean, he does through us, and that's the point. Because he lives in us, and we extend his reach now, the jobs that we are given, this creation mandate. Does that make sense? Am I just way too enthusiastic about this? It's just like,
Well,
go for it.
fill the earth with people,
Yes.
okay? Subdue it.
Yes.
The people.
Say that again.
Subdue it. Well,
Yeah.
who is there to subdue? The people.
Yes.
Yeah,
People
so-
are part of the paradigm of what needs to be subdued.
So fill the earth with people, subdue it, so you take dominion
Yeah.
over the people. But who is that takes dominion? If you
Great question. Absolute great question. Who are you taking? Well, first of all, you're taking control of the environment, first of all, because remember, even the garden needed to be maintained. You're right. So you're taking control of the garden, but you're establishing yourselves. When you get millions, billions, trillions of people, oh my, you have to have order. You have to have a civic structure. You have to have roads. You have to have buildings. You have to have ways of traveling. You have to have all the things that we see today. You have to have a government. If there was no fall, we would still have all of these things. We would still have to have some sort of civic order.
I just want, this might be helpful. So when I think of dominion, I think of responsibility, right?
Mhm.
So our leaders,
Mhm.
rulers are not, the difference between autocratic rule,
Yeah.
right, is I don't care about you at all,
Right.
right?
Right.
But this dominion is different in the sense that I am responsible for you. We're responsible for each other. My job as ruler is to show you the way and provide for you and care for you and create order for you, because that's where humans thrive.
Okay, hold on. Cliff, are you good?
Oh, she's saying the same thing I was thinking.
All right, excellent. Katie, and then Carol. Or Carol and Katie, whatever.
We had a model for that as the servant leader in Jesus himself.
Yes, absolutely. Did you hear that? We had a model in Jesus himself coming as a servant leader. So when he steps into creation, the Son of God, and the way, why was it that he was so radical, so countercultural? Jesus was the greatest counterculture. Well, no, because the rest of the earth had gone off in left field. And the Son of God shows up and exhibits himself as a servant leader, and nobody has a paradigm for it because of their religious leaders of the day that lorded everything over them. So yes, so people still need to be subdued, and order needs to be brought into societies. We're not talking about like individual person here and here and here. No. There's all sorts of civic structure that is implied. Charlie?
Yeah, I kind of push back against this dominion as being a authority over people by some entity, some person or group of people. The dominion is all of us having authority over the earth.
Yeah, but it's a both and.
Yeah.
It's a both and. It is. Because here's some ramifications, and I'm sorry to cut you off, we're just running out of time. Some ramifications of this. One of them, let me see where I'm at. One of the ramifications of the dominion discussion is that we today have our own dominions, but they look like You know, where are the places of influence? Where are the things that we have dominion over our children? The problem with dominion is it's salted. It's become a bad word. If I can come up with a different word, I come up with a different word, but this is God's word. But, you know, we order our homes. We order our families. We order our lawns. I got 2 acres, and we have to order that or it gets out of control. We have order here at St. Gabriel's, right? So dominions are not like, we think of dominions as evil power structures because that's the word. That's how the word is used today. That's not how the word was ever intended. It's just been grossly broken. Real fast, some ramifications. The stuff of creation is good, inherently good, and there's purpose to it. Work is good. The work of humanity is good. We have dominion in places that we have influence. We have in teaching, ordering, standing for the truth. Wherever we push back against the chaos in our own lives, in our own hearts, and also in our families, in society, wherever we're pushing back against the chaos, wherever it's possible of showing the love of Christ. And then being fruitful and filling the earth is having children and catechizing. That hasn't changed. It's bringing children up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. That hasn't changed. But what has changed is sin. We cannot assume that every human being is going to live under the direction of God. And so the second aspect of filling the earth, multiplying and filling the earth, has to happen with evangelism. It just has to. That's why now we have Matthew 28 to go into all the earth and make disciples, baptizing them, yada, yada, yada. That's why that verse is an extension of this verse. And then one last implication, one final implication is that we are God's little statues. We are God's little statues, even in this life today, where our mere presence, as we go out into the world, we reflect. But when we are acting within this subduing, taking dominion, when we're pushing back against the chaos, we are declaring that God is here. This territory is His. This church is God's territory. Both physically and spiritually, this church is God's territory. Our homes better be God's territory. Now, that puts an even stronger weight on our shoulders to raise up our kids in a certain way and to live with our spouses in a certain way or live with our family members, our extended family in a certain way. But we declare this territory is His. When we are brought onto the city board, city council, whatever, we're making a declaration through our decision. These are the things I stand for. These are the things I believe. And God is in my vote. Right? Because we are statues declaring the territory of God. All right. I've only got a couple minutes and I've got to run. I hate that. How does this tie into our mission statement, bearing the redemptive image of Christ in a broken world? I think first of all, God's image is now refined in Christ. To say that we are made in the image of God from the very beginning, what that meant in both a verbal and noun form, what that meant has been refined over the ages, because now we know more. I was going to say we know better. We know more We know more because God's plan has been revealed. And his plan is to come to earth, to send his son, to come to earth and take the punishment of sin upon himself. That gives us a new, fuller image, a new, fuller understanding of what the image of God, who this God is that we reflect. So as images of God, we now reflect a redemptive God. We now reflect a Christ who came to earth to sacrifice himself so that we might be restored to him. The image of God is a redemptive God. We're also called to bear. We bear that image. We can make a declaration of what is, but what this statement says, we have a responsibility to do something. You know where I stand on, works and faith and all that stuff. So when I say that, please hear this statement in that context. But by implication, a mission means we have marching orders. So we don't do this to earn favor with God, bearing the redemptive image of Christ. We do it because of the love of Christ that has come and redeemed us, that has brought us to our own knees, that's shaken us to the very core and claimed us to be his. I hope that's for all of us. I really do. We are called to bear that. We're called to take it out wherever we go. We are called to make decisions. We are called to respond in ways that reflect a redemptive Christ. That doesn't necessarily mean we stand on the street corner with a Bible and a bullhorn. I don't think that's effective. That's not what I'm saying. There are some people that do. God bless them. Maybe they are. The guy with the bannerman, the guy with the sign that says John 3:16, he sits behind the goal post in an NFL game, and every time there's a goal, he throws up the sign, John 3:16. There's a song written about him called Bannerman. I love it. We are called to bear in all the areas of influence, in all the places that we go out, and I am out of time, and we go to a world that is broken.
In chaos.
In chaos. We go to people whose hearts are in chaos. And picture one person in your life. I've got 10. Picture one person in your life whose life is in chaos today. Their hearts are broken. And now take that person and put them in the context of a created order and how God stepped into chaos and brought it into order. Brings and step by step, he creates more order out of chaos. And then he calls us. And he says, I'm going to give you one of the most dignified tasks that I could comprehend. Of course, God can comprehend anyway. He didn't quite say it like that. That I am going to give you the most dignified task that you can comprehend. I want you to be like me. I want you to look like me. I want you to reflect me. And I want you to take your lives out into the world and offer people order out of chaos. And that order comes through redemption. This statement, and Jenny's going to be yelling at me because I'm going to be 10 minutes and I'm going to be running into this statement came out of months. We had last year's retreat. We have some things that come out of last year's retreat, not this year's retreat in 23. And many of you were there. And it was a great time. But we got to the end, I'm like, I don't know. It's just what we had didn't cut it for me. I struggled for a long time. And Carol and I struggled for a long time. Carol and I would get together and we'd hash it out some more. We'd hash it out some more. We'd hash it out some more. And one day she asked me, what is your theology of mission? I mean, it was like a whole list of things. And by the way, over here, if we get to it, what is your theology of mission? And I don't even remember any of the things that we talked about. All I remember is theology of mission, and I'm writing down notes. I'm like, well, it's not this, and it's not this. I'm like, well, it goes back to creation. And I'm just writing all these notes. I don't know what she was saying. All of you. I'm sure we determined something in that conversation. But then we started talking about theology of mission. We started talking about God and mission. And Carol said, wow, that sounds like bearing the redemptive image of Christ to a broken world. And I'm like, oh, that's good. That's good. And we sat on it for a while. We sat on it for a bit still. And we tried to refine it, and then eventually it all just kind of flowed together. We started putting the website together and all these things together. I can tell you that I believe beyond a shadow of a doubt that God has led us to this statement. That God has led us to this statement. There's nothing special about us or anything like that. I just think He's brought us to this moment because right now we are making decisions for the church that hopefully will impact us for the next 5 to 10 years. But we have to know why we're going. We have to know where we're going. We have to know what is going to define that path. We have to have that litmus test. And I think it's this. No, it's this. And if we get down the road and God like smacks us upside the head and said, you know, you had it wrong all the time. I'm like, really? Okay. You know, I'll try to, but I don't think so. I think God has led us to this and led us to, am I pointing to the right statement? Good. God has led us to this. Oh, here we go. God has led us to this. Isn't that cool? And He wants us to be this. Not to have a really cool statement. If this just was a really cool sentence, we might as well just pack it in. Really. If this is just, oh, wow, you know, it's really theological and Rob really likes it. So what? Let's pack it in. But God is at work. He's at work here. The devil is at work outside. There's a lot of spiritual battle that's going on right now. That's a whole nother topic to discuss. But we have Christ in us, and He has called us to this task, to bear the redemptive image of Christ to the broken world. I know I'm coming. I'm coming. I'm going to go.